Hey guys, Cisco here, and welcome to the spoiler review of Dune Part 2. This is a super good movie. It's a lot to unpack and a lot going on in it. So this movie it takes place where the second movie leaves off. Where the first, or Part 1 leaves off. So Part 1 left off was them, with Paul and his mom and those free beds, and well, the bed one as well. Uh, they're crossing the desert, and they're going somewhere, and there's like a bunch of these dead like enemy soldiers, like bodies that they're burning for some reason. Eventually they get to their destination, which was this like city thing that's like underground. They have and a bunch of the people there are accusing Paul and his mom of like murderers and all this stuff. They get like suspected to be spies and all this for by like by a guard and all this stuff. They taught anyways. So the leader of the group that they were with talks to the village, like leaders, and they about like their fates. And so Paul, one of the ladies is very harsh on him and like wants to kick him out. The guy that was kind of leading those people that Paul and his mom were with, believes Paul to be. Now I'm gonna try with the name, but I think like Medjib was the name of it. It's basically like a prophet, in their religion. And anyways, what ends up happening is Paul's mom ends up becoming the Reverend Mother, which basically means that she holds all this knowledge of like the religious stuff, and so she now has to drink from the water of life, which is this very blue substance that comes from the sandworms. Actually, what they do is they drown sandworms. So they like grab a sandworm, drown it, and then they stick this giant syringe thing into it, and it pumps out the water, pumps out this blue liquid, and then they like put it in this giant like vase thing for like hold on to it and for people to drink. Anyways, so Paul's mom becoming the Reverend Mother seems to have had some consequences because Paul's mom is, is pregnant. Um, and I remember like after she drinks the water of life, she's having like this super severe like it looks like she's having like a seizure, like she's freaking the F out. Like she is clearly on some hardcore drugs. And then they also have these shots where it's like blue and there's like things happening because when you drink this water, it somehow allows you to see the past, which then lets you see the future because you can now understand the past because you could see and you know everything that happened. It's very confusing. Oh yeah, you could also see like alternate realities that comes important later. It's weird. The old Reverend Mother basically after they did that realized what they just did. They just got a pregnant. They just did that to they just almost killed a pregnant woman. And again, that seems to have some consequences that they haven't that don't really seem to happen in this movie. But there seems to be some problem with pregnant women. Also, men cannot drink the water of life unless they're a prophet. Men will just die. Females may or may not die. Men, unless you're the prophet, unless you're a prophet, will just straight up die. And how that works, no flipping clue. But yeah, so there's there's also multiple Reverend mothers. You meet a couple. You meet at least two. Paul's mom, and then well, sort of three if you count the one before Paul's mom, but you don't really meet her. She just kind of does that ritual, points out the pregnant thing, and then that's kind of the end of it. But anyways, so basically what happens is I forgot they put these like blue markings on Paul's mom's face for some reason. Also, now Paul's mom can talk to her baby that she's still pregnant with, Paul's daughter, and Paul's daughter is immediately asking questions about stuff regarding all this, and is asking, like her and Paul's mom about like certain things for like what Paul's doing and stuff, and Paul gives us answers and stuff. It's a mess. It's kind of a mess. Um, so like while that's all happening, Paul basically decides he wants to try to live with the Freemans in like one of their ways. Um, Not only does he end up doing that, succeed in doing that, but he like does stuff that very much like was like written in like prophecies and stuff. So the leader, so that like leader guy that he met, it actually says his name somewhere down here. Basically gets more and more Stigler. That's right, Stigler. Stigler gets like more and more like certain that he is that who he thinks he is and stuff, and that causes a lot to happen. They end up fighting like multiple of those like enemies to like making all this all this stuff. All this stuff, and eventually, like, and it shows like the Baron's army a little bit, and so at one point, Baron apparently has two sons. There's this bigger guy who talks to the Baron a lot, and he's kind of shown multiple times as like a leader, but he's also kind of shown as like a bit of a coward because he like runs to his like ship and stuff multiple times, and he ends up basically getting like replaced, I guess, by his nephew, and his nephew. I want to say it's his brother, but like the nephew of the Baron, the like big honcho Baron. At least two of these guys have like Baron in their name, so it gets super confusing to me. But the bigger Baron, the like kind of main leader one, a lot of stuff happens there. Basically, it's a little freaky because like when they first show him, he's in this room and he's like has these and there's a guy who walks in with like different blades, and he grabs this knife and stabs two of like the girls that are sort of there as like helpers. For some reason everyone's like bald if they're like with the Barons. I never understood that. There's three girls who are wearing all black. They look more like the Barons and like other soldiers, just without like they just don't have the white skin. They have like a more pale like or a more peach colored like normal human shade of like the normal human like skin color for white, and they don't say or do anything, but they seem pretty creepy. So that's fun. In fact, this whole guy, this like nephew of the Barons, this whole thing is creepy. Apparently, pain is pleasure to him, and he kind of lives off of like all this stuff, and so much. It's kind of a mess. Anyway. But anyways, so Paul and like the Freemans, they like continue to do the raids and stuff, which only serves to like piss off the Barons basically. So then the Barons get more and more agitated and frustrated. Paul's mom ends up going south because apparently south on Arrakis has more Freemans, but they're Freemans who are seemingly like much more like religious, and they're a lot different than they're like much more religious, and they're a lot different than the northern ones. So the northern ones are like they seem to be kind of like enemies a little bit, but not super severely because they do deal with each other as much as they have to, but that's about it. But anyways, so there's all this stuff that happens like when Paul is doing his like training. Yeah, so Paul's mom is down there in the south, like doing like religious stuff, like they make some water of the life for when Paul gets down there, and she's determined to like make the non-believers believe in him and all this stuff. And she like does utilize that power of like the different voice change. It just doesn't seem to be as effective as it was in part one. Because part one they were flipping mind controlling two guys. Was it part one here or part two here? There's seemingly none of that mind controlling. It's just like using it as a way to like yell at people, which is interesting. I'm sorry, I'm all over the place. This movie itself, it's all over the place. So it's very hard to keep track of it all. But yeah, like basically Paul kind of like falls in love with this one girl, which is who was played by Zendaya. And in addition to that, Paul like because Paul kind of goes more and more like with the religious, like being a prophet and all that stuff. The girl that Zendaya plays like grows farther and farther apart from him, and that seemingly becomes important later. Anyways, so Paul at one point he actually finds his one of his old like teachers, like masters, like people that he was friends with and highly like respected back in his home planet, despite seemingly all of them were dead. And it wasn't Duncan, which was a little unfortunate because Duncan was such a badass. Duncan this doesn't show up at all in this movie, so Duncan seemingly died in the first movie, which I guess is a fully surprise to me considering the way that he went out. But yeah, it seems like he's dead. What did I go here? Gurney maybe. I think it was Gurney, but anyways, Paul can like tell who this guy is based off his footsteps, which is why he kind of singled him out. And this guy is him and Paul kind of become good friends, and obviously people are worried about him just because they have yet another like outsider among them. The Freemans are pretty worried about it. Or at least some of them are. And anyways, so he pretty sure it was Gunner. It was Gunnery, but I could be wrong. Is there a Gunnery or Fade? But I think Fade was someone else. Pretty sure it was Gurney. Pretty sure. But yeah, so Gurney, like, he tells them where, because, like, every house, the house are just the, like, super important, like, rich people in this universe that, like, on the planets and stuff. He knows where the Atreides, one is. It's on Arrakis, Yeah. So, anyways, they go there and they get like they get the nukes, and then they right all this stuff, and then when Paul when Paul does finally go to the south, his mom is of course like waiting for him. Paul drinks from the water of life and is like on the brink of death. The girl that Zendaya plays like um, brings him back to normal instantly, which is kind of interesting. And then she's very like upset and angry about the whole thing on account of she's like super not religious, like into this religion, and she hates like all of this, and she thinks that she basically is like an atheist. Like she doesn't believe that this religious group is basically like a real thing, and just like gets more and more angry at it. It's a whole thing. And eventually Paul goes to be with everybody. All the Freemans, and seemingly his mom is there. And what happens is Paul walks in and is immediately, right, like saying all this stuff about how he's Majib and how he's going to, like, do all this stuff for them. And there's a few people who don't, like, believe him. So then he, like, says a certain thing that I believe only them would seemingly know. And then that kind of prompts them all to, like, believe in him. So then he talks about how he promised, how like he promises green paradise and all this stuff. And then they get like a battle plan ready for dealing with the Emperor. The Emperor is mentioned in the first movie, but he's more mentioned in this movie, in part two here. And the Emperor's daughter is actually like how this movie starts. It starts with the Emperor's daughter making a like voice recording of like basically like an audio log about how her dad is really saying anything at the moment for whatever reason. There's like a, they didn't do a whole lot with those characters, but they did do some, and that's where the other Reverend Mother comes in at. She's a part of like that family, and so that ends up becoming a whole thing. But basically, um, eventually Paul and his guys like they get suit up ready to get their game plan, so they attack where the Emperor currently is, which then results in Paul, and the other Freemans and Gunry. They walk in to where the Emperor like they end up having this whole battle that's like destroying their army, and he walks into where the Emperor currently is, and he um well, I wouldn't say he's allowed in. They like beat up some guard. It's just that the Emperor and like his family are standing to the side with like the Emperor's like royal guard, basically like protect, like standing around him and swords, and they just watch him. They just watch Paul walk into the room, like up to the Baron who's on the floor, dying because they broke his like they basically broke the machine that was like keeping him alive and stuff. And then Paul says something to him and then jabs his knife into his like throat. And then Paul walks over to the Emperor and that freaks out the guards, so they all have their swords pointed at him. But Paul, of course, isn't trying to hurt them. He basically says that he challenges the Emperor and all this stuff. And then they leave, but then like the battle rages on, and Gunry is like a fucking badass, just like Duncan was, and is like beating the fuck out of a bunch of guys. Oh yeah, Gunry fights and kills um, that uh, that one Gunry's the one nephew who shows up a lot in the first two movies, who and he's kind of seen as like a failure, and Gunry's like pissed at him for killing his whole family and all this stuff, and ends up killing him, um, killing this Baron. So there's like one Baron left essentially. Speaking of that last Baron, because I didn't mention him, after the whole thing with giving him like the knife and stuff, it's revealed that they actually have three members of the House of Atreides. They're not super like they're not seemingly very like important members. They're just because they don't have names. Like, well, I mean they do. They mention one of them by name, but they're not like Paul, right? They're not like the Duke. They're not like a part of the royal family, seemingly. Anyways, the big Baron who Paul then flipping shoves a knife into the throat of, wanted to do something special for the newest Baron, the one that like stabbed those girls with that knife, and so he gets put up in combat against three House of Atreides, two of which are like drugged, and then like two of them are drugged, so that's easy. The older one, however, the older House of Atreides like member is not drugged, and the reason for that is because the Baron wanted to give him a treat, like a reward, give him like a little surprise, like a little treat. Um, everybody was confused as to why it wasn't called off and stuff, and there was there was a Reverend Mother there, and seemingly the girl is under her because sort of how like they were basically they were sort of like nuns. They were all like singing together, and so what happens is the fight rages on for a while. Eventually, I wish I could remember their flipping names, but all three of them had like Baron in their names, so I'm just used to saying that. But eventually, that older guy, and eventually the fighting ends with, as I'm sure you would expect, the nephew of the Baron wins. And so he's like walking up through the palace, and he runs into one of those girls that's under like the Reverend Butter of like that of them, and she basically seduces him. Um, they end up like walking, and they end up at a part that the nephew like hadn't been to before, seemingly, and she like talks about how like she's going to be in like her room and all this stuff, and he like follows her in there, and then she does the same thing that the Reverend Mother did to Paul in the first movie with the box and like the syringe thing. And anyway, so Paul ends up, or the Baron ends up getting this. I forget what they were called, but this girl like pregnant was like a daughter, which like continues the bloodline. For whatever reason, this religious group loves females. The Reverend Mother is of course female, but that's mostly because men can't drink the thing that they have. But then like they have sisters which are under the Reverend Mother. They are they're kind of like how priests and like nuns and and like the bishops and stuff are under the Pope, where in this world the Pope would be the Reverend Mother, and then the the other groups would just be those girls, and so there's like a few of them that were pregnant. Basically, the reason why the Reverend Mother didn't go and do like talk to him and do all that is because of the fact that this Baron had killed his mother, so that's why one of the like people under her did it. That turns into a whole thing, anyways. So after the whole big battle, the Emperor eventually goes and meets. Anyways, there was like the Great House, which is seemingly a group you don't want to mess with. they end up flying ships around. And as that's happening, the emperor then like walks into the room with his daughter, their reverend mother, their like support that baron because he's the only one left, and like some of their men. And so that turns into a whole thing where like Paul has, his guy send a message to the great house ships, and then after waiting for the message, Paul ends up challenging the emperor, but then the emperor's champion is of course the last baron, who was cousins with Paul, because like the barons and the Atreides are cousins. Anyway, so that turns into a whole like fight where um, basically Paul was, despite Paul having like a different like love interest, Paul was going to marry the emperor's daughter and take the throne, but then have his daughter as like his wife, his like concubine, basically, his wife, and that turns into a whole thing. So Paul and the Baron go at it for a while, and all hope is seemingly lost. The Baron is like kicking ass in this fight, but Paul manages to manages to find a weak spot. He pulls a Aizawa from My Hero Academia and aims for the weak points. So then, like once he like won that battle, then he walks over to the Emperor and doesn't really like the girl who Paul was like basically like wanting to marry was obviously yelling at him to spare the Emperor's life and that she would like marry him. But Paul doesn't like seem to do anything doesn't do anything hostile. He just holds his hand out slightly. And then the Emperor takes his hand, like leans down and kisses it, and then everybody is like kneeling and stuff and freaking out, except for the girl that Zendaya plays because she ends up like walking out. Johnny ends up like walking out because her and Paul like had something together, and Paul is choosing to like not not really go for her, but like continue this whole like religious crap and all that stuff that she doesn't really care about. So she like walks off, and then oh yeah, I remember after Paul like won, Paul's mom talks to telepathically, basically talks to the other Reverend Mother, and they had like a interesting little chat, and then anyway, so after that, the Great House responds saying that they denied that request. So then Paul gets his forces to like basically fight them, and then the Paul's mom's um, future daughter basically goes like, "What's happening?" Because they can talk, so they actually gave the baby like some sort of telepathic voice that's speaking in full sentences, and the Reverend Mother, Paul's mom, basically just goes like, "The Holy Wars is now starting," and immediately in my mind I went to the the Crusades from real life. It's like the real life equivalent, basically, and that's just kind of how it ends. And that's just how it ends. So it definitely looks like there will be more Dune movies. I'm not seeing from I from my understanding, the next book is the Dark Dune Messiah or something like that. I don't know enough about Dune to really know what's after this point. I'm very excited to see more though and see how the story unfolds and what happens between Paul and Johnny and you know, seeing like how Paul handles like having the throne and all that stuff. But yeah, that about does it. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked it, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, share the video, ring the bell, do all the algorithmic garbage. It helps us out a lot, and it means a lot to us. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye. Oh.